All right, let's switch gears a little bit. We're going to be having on soon Steve Gold. He's the president of the Truckers Network Association. This is based on we've seen multiple reporting now over a fatal crash in Florida, especially now that there's multiple CDL violations uncovered. And I wanted to get Steve's thoughts here. We've had him on the show last week talking about the state of CDL schools and what to look for, and it looks like this information is more timely than ever. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thomas, thank you again. It's deja vu. Good to be here. Good to see you. 1 week later, crazy.
It absolutely is. And I think you also had an article in the Daily Caller that you recently read talking about the record trucking related carnage is, in fact, no accident. And this is, of course, related to those events. Talk a little bit about what went behind the scenes on this article. Then we'll dive into some of the details because it does appear there may be some more structural things under the surface that folks need to be aware of.
So we penned that article like a week ago. Daily Caller picked it up. For those of you who don't follow any Washington, D.C. press, Daily Caller is where a lot of politicians and lawmakers go for information news. And then 2 days later, I think everyone has now seen this individual who turned out to be, he took a U-turn in Florida. He was a non-domiciled CDL holder who got his CDL out of the state of California. Driving in Florida, took a U-turn. Family of three, unfortunately, horrifically perished in an accident, and it's all bad. When the state of Florida and the federal government looked into it, turned out couldn't speak English, had failed his English test when he went to the DMV for CDL, blah, blah, blah. The guy should not have been behind the wheel of a truck. He'd been pulled over historically in New Mexico. So all horrible things. This is like, I think, other than Putin and Trump, the second most social media, whatever you call it, stream story over the weekend about this individual. So, this is a hot topic, and it just gets to the heart of who is driving trucks. How are these individuals getting CDLs? What is going on across this country? And, I wrote the Daily Caller op-ed before all this went down, but, there's 100 fatalities a week in this country due to heavy trucks, and 5,000 a year. So this is a massive problem. And it's great to see Secretary Duffy, the President of the United States, put out an executive order, only English speaking truck drivers. I think you guys have covered pretty well that now at weigh stations, every driver is getting pulled over and making sure that they can speak English. But Secretary Duffy now is looking into how states are actually licensing drivers and going back to the way it should be, where you need to be a state licensed CDL school to train somebody, and enough, craziness here. So, I think it's super positive. It's something we've been pushing on for a lot of years in the prior administration, and certainly Secretary Duffy, President Trump, they're getting all over this issue. Who wants to drive next to a truck who isn't safe? So, it's really positive coming out of that, and I appreciate you taking the time to just talk to your listeners here about how important this issue is.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, and that's what I've done some research on CDL fraud and non-domiciled CDLs had came up. When we're talking about a domiciled versus a non-domiciled, one of my biggest questions, and I'm really glad to have you on the show because you're heavily involved in what good CDL schools look like. You all have a nationwide footprint. Is that something where you are all taking the same CDL test? The domicile and the non-domicile is just the address on the CDL once it's awarded.
It's a little bit more than that. So, and just by way of background, we have 152 schools nationwide. We operate in 44 different states. We do commercial driver training in 44 different states with 152 schools. We'll train way over 20,000 people this year how to drive a semi-truck. So we see a lot of humans, and we seed more humans into the industry than I think any other institution on the planet. A non-domiciled CDL. So in Illinois, where we're headquartered, it used to be if you want a commercial driver's license, you had to show up to the Secretary of State's office to get your permit and show your birth certificate. You had to show not only were you born in the country, but you were a resident of Illinois. And then if you weren't, you couldn't go ahead and test for your CDL. I mean, it was that simple. That is not like ancient history. That was like 5 years ago. Somehow everything got watered down. And a non-domiciled CDL holder could be two things. One, they could have like a work visa from a foreign country, any foreign country, come into this country and not have to demonstrate that they're a citizen of the United States, a permanent citizen of the United States. Or two, they can be from a neighboring state. So like commercial driver's licenses are state mandated things. These aren't like, there's not a national CDL, although some people have talked about that in history. But right now, driver's licenses and commercial driver's licenses are state pieces of paper. So historically, you had to be a resident of the state where you want a commercial driver's license. You couldn't train in Illinois and then go to Indiana and get your commercial driver's license. You had to be a resident of Indiana first and have an Indiana driver's license to get your commercial driver's license. So there's two types of non-domiciled. One is you're likely came outside this country and you walked in with your visa or someone work permit. Two is your adjoining state or some other state, and you got licensed in the state where you happen to be at the time. You're not a resident of that state. So those are the two different flavors. Either way, I mean, it's important because different states have different rules for CDL training and CDL requirements. Like in the state of Illinois, we're licensed by the Illinois Secretary of State. The state of Ohio, we're regulated by the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. So those two states have different requirements if you want to be a CDL holder and a CDL school and trainer. And, unfortunately, the FMCSA has created mass chaos. Historically, I think Secretary Duffy's at the tip of the iceberg straightening it out because he's starting to understand how out of control this is. But the FMCSA comes in February 2022 and puts in the entry-level driver training rules, and now there's just mass confusion. Anybody comes into a DMV, you can get your permit online for $50, which is unheard of, because really, what kind of training are you getting that way? A lot of people go, it's not so hard. I've been driving my whole life. Well, you know what? I don't want to put myself or my family at risk driving next to the truck driver that you're training, and nobody does. But, like this accident brings us up to the top of the heap. Like this is the number one story trending after Putin this weekend, Putin and Trump. So it's becoming a really important issue, and people are starting to recognize that highway safety and truck drivers are the key here. And figuring this out, unwinding it. I think you're gonna see Secretary Duffy just tweeted something 5 minutes ago, like, "Hey, states, you better get it on it." Like it's super positive. It's something that my company and others have been pushing for a long time.
So I'm going to dive into the facts of this Florida case first to illustrate that patchwork of state regulations. And we're going to dive into how easy could it be if Thomas wants to get his CDL with no experience driving, because I'm very curious. I want to do this one day, I think, for the sake of journalistic curiosity. According to this the Florida crash, Washington State had issued the driver a regular full-term CDL in 2023. However, asylum seekers or individuals without legal status are not eligible. So that's the first instance where an individual who should not have received one got one. Looking at the facts, California later issued the driver a limited term non-domiciled CDL by 2024, which is being under investigation. So we see an instance where once you get a CDL, you can go to another state and do a swapsies depending upon their status and their regulatory requirements. It could be extremely easy. I remember Oregon, when I spoke with the Texas Department of Safety, Oregon had a similar issue where they were just allowing for swapsies, and you could just swap a Mexican or Canadian CDL version to a US one until they were notified that you are actually not supposed to do that. So let's talk about that first. It looks like if you find the right state, you can kind of skirt some of these regulations if you don't have, which should have been I-9, green card, the system itself to show this work visa was not being followed, it appears.
Right. I mean, I can't speak for those states. I mean, if you want to come into our school, and by the way, we're not unique. There's other commercial driving schools like us. We give every student a test to make sure they can speak English. And, please write for us, what color is a stop sign? RED. And if they can't do that, and then we make them write like a 2-sentence paragraph, like why they want to be a commercial truck driver. If they can't do that, we won't enroll them. They have to go to an English as a second language course first before they can even enroll, right? So, and they need a valid driver's license. Now, an individual walks into our school, has a valid driver's license. We are not the DMV who issued that individual that driver's license. We don't know if some state just looked at someone's documents and issued them a license. But that is, that's like the minimum requirement. So you got to speak English, you got to be able to read and write English, or we're not going to enroll you in our school. However, there's a lot of other institutions who are training schools and nefarious providers. They'll roll anybody. Give me $100 and I'll do something for you online. CDL.com. It takes no problem. We'll train you in Russian. We'll train you in Spanish. That's not going to cut it. And I think what Secretary Duffy is saying here is, hey, game is over. I'm cleaning it up. I'm getting you back to how the rules were written. You need to be a state licensed training provider first, and then I'll approve you at the federal level. I'm putting words in his mouth, but I think they're starting to crack down and understand, like, nobody wants these highway fatalities. 100,000 heavy truck incidents, not fatalities, but incidents a year. Like, the numbers are sort of staggering. It's bad for our industry. Insurance rates are through the roof. Like, there's downstream impacts here when bad things happen. And, I had the privilege of being on Fox News earlier this morning talking about this. And my comment is, like, the White House or the Department of Transportation are the tip of the iceberg of this topic. And I think there's a massive opportunity to get it right. There's 2,100 state licensed commercial driving schools in this country. There's almost 40,000 training providers in the federal training provider registry. I mean, who's training these people? Joe's Towing Service? Like, you could find them. You could find Joe's Towing Service in the serious training provider registry. Like, you think that guy is an educator? Do you think he's going to train somebody how to drive a truck driving next to you on the highway in a safe way? And way downstream, that individual gets trained in a BS kind of way, and it works for a small carrier. Broker was that small carrier load, gives it to this guy to drive. He puts it over the center of the bridge. Like, bad things happen. So to me, it starts with education. It starts with the right training, and then works from there. And, I think last week we talked about, like, companies like Swift, who, have a really high standard for the driver. They're not going to just hire anybody. They're definitely not going to hire anybody from any education institution that just sprung up overnight. They understand, like, the downstream consequences of bad driving behavior. So, and there's other large employers like that. But, the industry's got it smarter. I mean, if you're a small trucker, you don't have a compliance department. Like, how do you know that individual can drive? We have a tool called 160 scoring. We're evaluating drivers all the time for these smaller carriers because they don't have the competency, they don't have capability, they don't have somebody who can actually, score and test drive everybody like Swift can. But this is a serious issue, and unfortunately, it takes, like, a horrific accident or a set of accidents for people to start paying attention. And I think there's a lot of us who are going, it's about time, because nobody can afford more and more fatalities and accidents on the highway.
So let's say, for instance, let's say I want to get my CDL right now. I got my $100. How low is the bar? How can I just get this, like, pay dude $100 and take it all online? And if let's say I go to Florida, who is third party audits, so they self certify. I'm going to pick on the state of Florida for a minute. Let's say I go down to Florida and I do that. Can I just take the whole thing online and then just, like, take the CDL exam? And as long as I just, like, barely pass and, like, can back the truck up a little bit, could I, like, get on the road? Is that how easy, or is it still you need to go to a school and physically be somewhere? Because from my experience at US Express, that is what you had to do. You had to go to a physical school that was partnered with and accredited with the carrier. On the very opposite end, how loosey-goosey can it be?
I'm sure, Thomas, if you want to find a way to do it in any state like that for $100, $200, you will find it. You will find a way. You will find a DMV. You can get you can get into the entry-level driver training provider list through $50 online, xyz.com, some BS training, which is not mandated by the state of Florida, right? So you can get in there, and then somehow you can find some provider for a few dollars to teach you how to back the truck or basic skills, and then you go to the DMV and you try it. Like, the FMCSA has rules. Like, there's actual rules that you have to attest to be a training provider in the entry level driver training system. Like, there's actual governance and rules that people are just blowing off. I mean, let's just face it, that's happening every day. So I'm sure if you wanted to find a way to do that for, a few $100, you can definitely find a way to do it. For sure, in California, there are plenty of providers who are charging close to nothing to train you to get a commercial driver's license. Like, We see it all the time. We introduced a bill in the state of California along with California Trucking Association, AAA, Teamsters, California Highway Patrol co-sponsored it to get rid of all the nefarious trucking schools because it's an epidemic, and in California is the second highest fatality rate due to heavy truck incidents in the country. Texas is unfortunately number one. So, the state of California is, unfortunately, this is a bad example of an individual who somehow got his driver's license. Who knows how? But California, there's a bill that passed unanimously to root out all the nefarious CDL schools in the state. And so there's progress, but we need 49 other states to get on it and take the same sort of aggressive action. I would tell you, Florida is the state that's taking the most aggressive action. Like, they are not messing around. They're rescinding training providers, they're sending cease and desist letters, and that's all public information. So, it's great to see like the state of Florida sort of leading the way on these questions.
And in your article, you brought up a staggering statistic about the schooling and the licensing. Over 30,000 commercial driving schools are approved by the FMCSA. Only 2,100 of these are state certified. And the wildest one is you had wrote that the largest employers of truckers make up only 10% of the trucking industry. And so if they're rejecting nearly half of their driver applicants for safety evaluation, which I think that's a very nice one. When I was at US Express for existing drivers, ours would be closer to like 75 to 90% for drivers. For the first ones, the new ones, you would be lucky enough out of 100 applicants coming in like first seat. You would be happy to have like 10 show up to orientation. 5 could not pass orientation because they lied about stuff, and 3 would finally make it before they even hit their first trainer. So that's one of the things you brought up, is that right now it does appear to be, based on my understanding of the data, is that it's like your yard is full of weeds, and now we finally realize that we kind of have a problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. Just going back to your example or your history at US Express, just think how much money you wasted at US Express trying to screen people who came from who knows where to apply for a job, and they didn't have the right credentials, and you hired them or you brought them in or you paid money to bus them in for orientation or flew them in, and they spent time with you, you put them in their truck, and guess what? They can't even come close to being compliant. That is such a giant waste of money for so many organizations. Instead of trying to find where do I find the best drivers? How do I partner with like a school, like you mentioned earlier, just to get a flow of high quality trained drivers? It's if the industry, and I'm talking about the leading carriers in this country and the leading shippers in the country, are rejecting, I use 50%. Those drivers are going somewhere. They're being hired by that carrier who, might have 10 trucks or less. They don't have compliance. They don't have a way to evaluate that individual. Like, they're ending up on the road, somehow. And they're driving next to you and me and putting our families at risk every day. The industry needs something. And that's why I'll say it here all day long. Like, to me, it starts with education. People think that might be self-serving, but I don't really care. Go to a different school that's licensed by the state of Illinois. Just go to a school where you're going to get trained in a proper way, so you don't put the general public at risk, and you don't put your employer at risk. Nobody wants a $10 million, $20 million, $100 million, nuclear lawsuit. Just partner with the right kind of training providers out there and do it right. I mean, it doesn't really, it's a huge cost benefit to do it right. And it's just amazing to me how many carriers or shippers, are willing to take the risk. Like, it makes no sense. You should look at the FMCSA training provider registry and see the names of companies in them. There's like Fortune 50 companies being named in there where they're not the training provider and somebody else is using their name in that system. That is beyond bending the rules. So there's a lot of activity going on in this space. And like I said earlier, it's becoming a super hot topic because until now, no one's really paid attention. But, we're super excited to see both the White House and Department of Transportation, Secretary Duffy, President of the United States putting together an executive order on this. A lot of action in a very short amount of time. It's great to see.
And if we have some policymakers watching this as well, if you had a wish list, or for folks who are not familiar with some easy, low hanging fruit that we can do to help start trying to tackle this beast, what are some quick things that you recommend? I know you also had some policy recommendations, but for listeners, what should we keep in mind to help try and just begin to even digest this level of craziness?
Yeah, at the federal level, it's super easy, and Secretary Duffy can control this. Um, just stop letting anybody become a training provider. If you want to be a training provider, demonstrate your state license to do it first and foremost. Because every state that we operate in, we have to have we're insured. We have to have a surety bond, so we're not ripping off people. We have to have a curriculum on file. Like there's laws in each one of these states. So first and foremost, at the federal level, don't let anybody in to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's training provider registry unless the training provider can demonstrate those things. And when you sign off as a training provider registry, you're actually attesting legally that you are those things. So it's amazing to me how many people are breaking the rules. So that's it. That's not a hard thing, right? That's something easy. And then, so that's at the federal level. And then you got to root out, I think what Secretary Duffy is saying is like, I want to take all these non-domiciled CDL holders, or I want to see all their training records. Like, show me the training provider who did this and why these guys should be on the highway, or gals should be on the highway. Like, I want to get them off ASAP because I can't afford to have more people getting killed on the highway. So I think there's a lot of work. He's definitely asked every state to provide non-domiciled CDL information. I have no idea what the status of that is, but I think that's something he can do as well. At the state level,
Yeah.
it's really easy. The state level, they know who the state licensed CDL training providers are. If somebody walks into DV and goes, "Oh yeah, I got my CDL training at Joe's Towing Service. I'm here to take my CDL test." That state go, "Well, no, that's not a state licensed CDL provider. That individual might be somehow in the federal registry, but you're not licensed in the state of Illinois to do that. So sorry, go to a licensed school, whether it's the 160 Driving Academy or some other school first, get
Yeah.
trained properly, consistent with the laws of Illinois, and then come see me." That's how the states can operate. So this is not like complex policy bill writing. This is like following the current laws on the books in a lot of states and at the federal level.
Final question here, less than a minute. If I'm involved and I'm a bad training school and one of my drivers who is not properly trained gets in an accident, can I be held legally culpable or liable because of that under current regs?
Well, that's a question I cannot answer. I mean, that's an excellent question. Look, I live in Chicago, right? And I don't know how it is in Chattanooga, but every other commercial is, "Hey, XYZ law firm, if you get hit by a truck, let us know." Like, the lawyers are after this. Those are typically quick settlements, $5 million, $2 million, $10 million, and move on.
Yeah.
Is the school, the training provider, liable as well? I don't know. Like, that's a really good question. Somehow they attested in the FMCSA database. If you look up any of our students over the last 5 years, we have a digital record of scores of how they performed in school, how many tests they take. We can push a button and get anybody any information on one of our past students. Joe's Towing Service and who knows where, who knows what the information is? Who knows, show me that. You attested in the federal registry about that you are compliant with these things. If it comes back that you weren't and you didn't train a person correctly, I don't know what the penalty is for that, but it would probably be not so good.
So that's kind of the skin in the game here, and I appreciate you going along a little bit more, going over for me on this. I believe it's super important information to listeners. Is that similar to how we see folks on social media going through carriers and seeing multiple DOT numbers and similar instances of fraud? For the drivers themselves, if the policies are being followed correctly, there should be a paper trail of who trained them, what school certified them, and potentially allow these bad actors, if there's skin in the game, and if you're doing your job right at 160 Academy, but these other individuals are not, theoretically there would be a similar approach, just like you're trying to tackle fraudulent motor carriers, except fraudulent CDL schools.
Right. The analogy I've heard is, when the pandemic came around and everybody was getting loans and they put in the PPP database, they need money and whatnot. There was so much fraud and abuse. And then the federal government, once that got over the hump, started going after a lot of people, realizing, like, wait a second, you totally attested, sort of same kind of thing, self-certification. You attested you were doing this in a compliant way. and that you're following all the laws or rules of the federal government, and you weren't. I've heard some noise around that going, well, okay, what's the penalty for that? Because I think nobody wants to lie in a federal agency that they're not doing things per the federal rules. So there's a lot to unpack here. It's, in my mind, pretty easy. We've met with probably 20 states on this topic over the last 2 years. It's pretty easy to get in compliance here. It's just a question is, how do you remove all the bad actors? How do you get all these individuals who are bad training providers out of the system? Because at the end of the day, I'll just go back. It's education. It's curriculum. We drop a good number of our students who aren't safe, and they don't take it seriously. Like, yes, we're trying to make money as an entity, as a commercial enterprise, but if we have students who aren't safe, like, I'm not going to turn that driver over to Swift Trucking, like, so they can have an accident on their dime. Like, no way. That doesn't make any sense. So, I got to deliver a good product. My competitors who are state licensed have to deliver a good product. And when I say that, I mean a safely trained driver in a compliant way who can back up all his scores and all his paperwork. That's what's important. That to me is like a good outcome, a good product, following curriculum. It's a great place for the industry to start, and then go from there.
Steve, thank you so much for hopping on the show. This was some amazing information as well, and I really appreciate you taking the time to rejoin us to talk about it. If folks want to check out what you're working on there as well and your schools, what's the best way to get more information?
Yeah, real easy. 160drivingacademy.com. Or anybody, yeah, it's been a very busy morning just based on
Yeah.
things I'm doing. But that's probably the best way. Or truckersnetwork.com to see our digital platform for experienced drivers in small carriers. So, but super, really appreciate you taking the time to set us up, and maybe we'll talk again next week. I mean, it's great. I mean, this is a really hot issue, and obviously you guys here at FreightWaves are super interested in it, and we're interested in it. And there are a lot of people, I would tell you, some of the biggest carriers are reaching out saying, like, we need reform ASAP. And I think they're weighing in with various politicians as well on this topic because it is important.
Well, I really appreciate it as well, Steve. We'll definitely catch up again soon.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Thomas.